Drones caused a fire at the Afipsky oil refinery in the Krasnodar region. Locals wrote about explosions and filmed the aftermath of the drone attack on video. The fire is visible on one of the facility's columns. It is a key unit of this oil refinery. The technological process of oil refining begins with it. The Afipsky oil refinery has been attacked by Ukrainian drones several times, and this Russian enterprise supplies fuel to its troops. Also, in the Krasnodar region, strikes were carried out on the port of Kavkaz. Oil was actively shipped through it, and as a result of the attack, a vessel was hit and the pier caught fire. 3 casualties have been reported. One strike and $50 million turned into scrap metal. The Lazars Group unit of the National Guard destroyed an expensive Russian Yastreb AV radar station. And this happened in the Luhansk region behind the line of contact. The soldiers published the video on social media. They worked on the target in coordination with the command post of the North Regional Center for Electronic Intelligence. After obtaining the exact location of the complex, the military sent a drone with ammunition there. The occupiers tried to save their equipment and move it away, but our drone operators landed the drone right on the vehicle and destroyed it. However, despite the losses, the Russians are building up forces and intensifying offensive actions. In particular, this applies to the Hulyapol direction in the Zaporizhzhia region. There, since the beginning of yesterday, enemy forces have attacked our defenders' positions 17 times. Well, one of the hottest sectors of the front in the Donetsk region remains the Kostiantynivka one. Yesterday, the occupiers tried to launch an assault in this direction 26 times. The situation is also difficult around Pokrovsk, where over 20 combat engagements occurred. In total, the General Staff counted 150 combat clashes. A real Santa Barbara, and that's how Volodymyr Zelensky described the situation with preparations for the next round of talks. And the president told journalists about this at a briefing in Paris. He says that at the request of the Americans, the trilateral meeting may be postponed again because they are not ready to travel outside the United States for negotiations right now and suggest meeting on their territory. Kyiv is ready, but the Russians are not. Instead, they proposed alternative locations, Turkey or Switzerland. So whether the meeting will take place is still unknown. It depends on the Americans who are organizing it, Zelensky explained.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed the strike on the Afipsky oil refinery and the port of Kavkaz. This is the Krasnodar region of Russia. Previously, Ukrainian drones hit a unit of the oil refinery that supplies fuel to the occupying forces. This is a key unit from which the entire technological process of oil refining begins. Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles have attacked the Afipsky refinery multiple times. Well, in the port of Kavkaz, through which the Russians ship oil, a technical vessel and a pier were damaged. Also, our defense forces attacked the Maykop military airfield tonight. That's in the Republic of Adygea in the Krasnodar region. Ukraine's defense forces are gradually moving forward in the south. But the key to a successful operation is operational silence, says the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who visited the southern operational zone. There, Oleksandr Syrsky met with group leaders and unit commanders who are fighting to liberate our settlements. I'll remind you, the Russians have recently stepped up in the Zaporizhzhia direction, and the intensity of assaults there sometimes exceeds the number of attacks in one of the most tense areas, which is currently Pokrovsk.
We're talking about the situation at the front. They captured Russian soldiers using a loudspeaker drone. Fighters from the Heart Border Brigade spotted a group of occupiers the moment they crossed our state border. Then drone operators struck the enemy, and a reconnaissance drone, which the border guards equipped with a loudspeaker, helped the Russians lay down their arms. The occupiers followed the commands coming from the drone, followed it, and that's how they were captured by our defenders. 153 combat engagements took place at the front over the past day, specifically in northern Kharkiv region. In the southern Slobozhanshchina direction, Russian troops tried to break through the defense lines of the defense forces near the village of Prylipka. Joining the national marathon broadcast is Viktor Tragubov. He's the spokesperson for the Joint Forces Group. Mr. Viktor, I welcome you. Good day.
I welcome you. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. First of all, I'd like to ask you about the Sumy region. The enemy is trying to break through there in the border village of Popivka. How is the situation overall changing on the Sumy border? And can we talk about a gradual buildup of Russian troop activity here?
It depends on what you compare it to. If we look at Russian activity across our sectors in general, and that's Sumy Kharkiv, well, a small part of Sumy Kharkiv and the Lyman direction in the Donetsk region, it has dropped significantly. It has dropped significantly overall. And against this backdrop, this small section of the Sumy region, compared to others, it maintains activity, but it's small. These events are, let's say, not as large scale as what's happening in the Lyman direction. And in principle, it's not hard for the Russians to maintain some intensity there because the intensity wasn't very high to begin with. This is the village of Hrabivske and the neighboring village of Ryasny. This is Pokrivka and this is Popivka. That is effectively 3 small villages right on the border, maybe, well, a kilometer from the border at most. And there really is constant pressure from infiltration groups. In the case of Hrabovsky, unfortunately, they're even there, beyond Hrabovsky, which is currently the only one fully occupied. They're trying to go past it and move towards Ryazan. So yes, there is a certain level of intensity in the Sumy region. I mean, specifically in the east of the Sumy region, which is part of our area of responsibility. The north of Sumy region, which is the responsibility of the Kursk troop grouping, has its own atmosphere. It's a bit of a different story there.
And if we talk about the infiltration measures carried out by the enemy, is it more about the movement of assault groups or sabotage and reconnaissance units?
Actually, there's no real difference now because if we're talking about a group of 2 or 3 people, well, usually you could call it an assault group, as a sabotage and reconnaissance unit typically requires some preparation. But in fact, these groups are moving in to establish a foothold. These are just infantry groups moving in specifically to cling to some feature of the terrain or landscape and wait for another group to arrive. So you could call them assault groups too. But in any case, it no longer has any practical significance. It's just 2 or 3 infantrymen with standard weapons, standard training, and so on.
And how important is the information effect of such advances in the border areas for the Russians when they try to showcase these specific gains in small villages?
There's virtually none. Well, it's not on that scale. To somehow brag to all of Russia that you've advanced 500 meters from the Ukrainian border and captured a village where, before the war, in Popivka, for example, 7 people lived, well, it's not exactly Berlin. And not even Brandenburg. So this very boasting, let's say, would be pathetic enough to have the opposite effect. Because they try to brag in other directions where they're at least attempting to move forward and take some settlements. But after you left Kupiansk there, for example, after they started retreating heavily in Zaporizhia, bragging about entering the town of Popivka by 500 meters, the village of Popivka with 7 people who were evacuated long ago, and occupying those heroic 4 houses, well, it just doesn't make sense.
I also want to ask you about Kupiansk. According to the latest information you provided, 20 Russians were surrounded there, and they were hiding on the grounds of a destroyed hospital. So how is this group behaving now? Are they receiving any reinforcements? Or are all these remnants of Russian troops in Kupiansk essentially left to their own devices?
They're trying to survive. They would certainly have been sent reinforcements if there were such an opportunity. But if you look at the map of the city, we can see that this is the city center, its actual center. And the Russians aren't even on the outskirts. They can't even reach the outskirts from either the north or the east, where they've been trying to do so. They are essentially dying on the approaches to the city. So there's absolutely no talk of sending reinforcements to these people, which would first have to reach the city and then move through it. The Russians understand this. That's why there's such an outcry on the channels of various Z-War correspondents right now. They finally started writing the truth about what's happening there, because what's happening is something they really don't like, which is just a few dozen people trying to survive in a basement. That's all for now.
Mr. Trehubov, thank you for joining us on the air. Viktor Trehubov, spokesperson for the Joint Forces Group, was on a direct line with the studio.